Hello and welcome to my office. So this is the second part of my 2020 variety review. Since the garden has had a frost and everything is pulled out for the most part. So this video will be only about tomatoes. If you would like information about anything else that I grew this year, the first part I will put a link down here. I am going to go through all the tomato varieties I grew for 2020, which is a lot. And I will show you a photo of each tomato variety that I have. I don't have a photo of all of them, but what I do have, I will show you. So let's get started. I have my list in alphabetical order, so we're just gonna go through alphabetically. And I will give you all the information that I can remember from each variety to help you maybe make your tomato list for next year. So the first one on the list is Amish paste. This plant is one of the plants that was affected by that late frost we had in May. We don't normally have a frost in May. Normally our last frost date is the end of April. I put a few plants out the very beginning of May and they were frosted on. I did cover them. Most of them were totally fine. The Amish paste was the one that I thought was not gonna make it, but it did. I do think that it was affected by the frost. It didn't give me a ton of tomatoes, but the ones that I did get were very meaty. There's not a lot of gel and seeds in those, and they were pretty big. They would make a great sauce tomato. Amish paste is a red tomato. I got the seeds from My Gardener, and I will be regrowing that one for 2021. The next tomato on the list is the Aunt Ruby's German Green. Now, this tomato I was unsure about, but I bought it because of the name. I got the seeds from Baker Creek, and I am telling you right now that this is one of my top 3 varieties of 2020, like just straight up. So, sometimes emotionally buying things because they make your heart feel good work out, and I think it did. So, this is a green tomato. It ripens to green. And I know that freaks people out, but when I tell you that this is one of the best tomatoes I've ever tasted in my life, I mean it. The best way to tell when these are ripe is to just give them a gentle squeeze on the bottom. When they have a little bit of a give to them, but they're not totally soft and they're not hard, then you know they're ready to pick. They also have a tiny bit of red streaking on the bottom when they're ripe. They are delicious. They are huge, and those plants were loaded. I had 2 of them. And again, I didn't even know what these tasted like, but I was like, well, I'm gonna plant 2 of them because I have space. Go, why not? So I planted 2 of these plants, and I'm really glad I did because they were absolutely delicious. So I will be regrowing those in 2021 for sure. The next one I had was the Black Seaman. And this is the tomato plant that I had planted at the front of the garden near the gate away from everything else. This variety it tasted good, but every single tomato on that plant cracked. It didn't matter if I watered them frequently, if I watered them on a set schedule, if I didn't water them, it didn't matter. They all cracked. Every single tomato on that plant cracked. So I would like to try this one again, but put it on a panel, put it on one of the parts of the cattle panel and see how it does. But it's a maybe. It's a maybe. It tasted good, but the cracking kind of made me a little wary. The next one on the list is the Blonde Girl Cherry. And this tomato is so good. It's a tiny yellow cherry tomato. It grows in clusters on the plant, and it's so good. It's like eating sunshine is really what it tastes like. That is definitely a regrow for 2021. Those seeds came from my friend Katie, but she got them from Tomato Fest. The next one is Brandywine Black. And these seeds I got from My Gardener. This is like a dark purple tomato. I'm not gonna be regrowing these, just get that out of the way. They taste good. They're not good enough for me to regrow them. They also cracked really bad on the top, all around the top. Every single tomato came off that plant super cracked, and I did not love that. So this is not a regrow, mostly because of the cracking. Now the next one is another dark purple, and it is called Carbon, and this one is for sure a regrow. These were so good. This is in my top 3 favorite tomatoes for 2020 for sure. It is a large slicer size. This plant had a problem with fungus gnats when it was small, and I think that that stunted its growth. And so the plant was always a little bit smaller than the other tomatoes around it, but I think that if I try it again next year, hopefully I'll have a better success with that and I will get more tomatoes off of it. So good. People rave about the Cherokee Purple, which is actually next on the list, but you can just take your Cherokee Purple and you can just throw it out the window because the Carbon is really the tomato you need to grow. I'm just saying. So speaking of the Cherokee Purple, like I said, you can take that and you can just throw it out the window because it's not very good. This is the 2nd year I've grown Cherokee Purple. Everybody says Cherokee Purple is like their favorite tomato of all time. Their whole life was changed when they tried a Cherokee Purple tomato. I don't feel like that at all. I don't feel like that at all. I feel like they're a little watery. Even if I pick them, it hasn't rained for a week, they haven't had any water, it's the middle of the day, it's so sunny, it's hot, the sugars are like so saturated in them. Not very good. Don't really like it. I would much rather have a Carbon versus a Cherokee Purple. Carbon would win any day of the week. So Cherokee Purple, no. The next one is the Chianti Rose, and this was my favorite tomato of 2019. I like this tomato a lot. It is a light red, almost pink color. It doesn't get super dark. They make big tomatoes. It is delicious. In terms of my list of rankings, this would probably be number 4 behind Aunt Ruby's German Green, Carbon, and Kellogg's Breakfast. Those are my top 3. We're just gonna spoil it. Those are my top 3. Not in any particular order. Chianti Rose is number 4, for sure. So I will be definitely regrowing that one next year. The next one is the Costaludo Genovese. Katie actually bought these seeds from Baker Creek. We thought they looked cool, and so she bought the seeds and we grew them. I won't be regrowing them. They're fine, but mine didn't get super big this year, and they're kind of a pain to work with when it comes to like cutting them up because they have all the ridges. So those will not be a regrow for next year. The next one is the Ghost Cherry. These seeds also came from Katie and they came from Tomato Fest. If you would like a cherry tomato plant that grows golf ball sized cherry tomatoes and also will take over your whole entire life, this is the plant for you. This plant went absolutely insane crazy. It was absolutely covered in tomatoes. Let me just preface this by saying I will not be regrowing this one, but if you like big cherry tomatoes, they're almost like a saladette size. They are not like a 1-bite cherry tomato, unless you have a big mouth, then maybe. They have a very bright flavor, but they also have a ton of gel and seeds. So if you do not like tomatoes that have lots of gel and seeds, these are not the tomato for you. The meat on the outside of the tomato is very thin. I ended up processing a lot of these in with the other tomatoes that I ran through my mixer attachment. I think that's really the best use for them. They taste good, but I will not be regrowing those. The next variety is Kellogg's Breakfast, and this is in my top 3 favorites of tomatoes for 2020. This tomato is, one, it's huge. Every tomato I've pulled off this plant has been between 10 ounces and a pound. So I've had a few that were over a pound. They are a yellow tomato. The inside is very meaty. There's not a ton of gel and seeds. They are a wide, flat kind of shaped tomato, which makes it great for a tomato sandwich because you can get a nice bread-sized slice out of the middle, which is awesome. They have an amazing flavor. It's a very rich flavor, but it's not rich in terms of like a red tomato flavor. It's very, like, has a very smooth texture to it, and it's just very bright. So those are for sure a regrow. Those may be a regrow for the rest of my life at this point. I mean, I'm just gonna come out and say it. Rest of my life, we'll always grow that one. The next variety is the large red cherry. These seeds came from M.I. Gardener. The Kellogg's breakfast seeds I also got from M.I. Gardener, but I know you can get those other places as well. The large red cherry I will not be regrowing. This is just a typical like store-bought red cherry tomato. The skin is kind of tough on these. They're a normal cherry tomato size. If you're looking for something to like make roasted cherry tomatoes with, or you just like the typical grocery store cherry tomato, this is a tomato for you. Next is the pineapple tomato, and this plant I had was weird. I've seen other people have pineapple tomato plants and they have these huge tomatoes. None of mine really got that big, but it was covered in these tomatoes that were between 4 and 6 ounces, and they have a really good flavor. It's a perfect tomato to just like eat as a snack, or eat with your lunch, or eat, you know, by itself. But I don't think I'm going to regrow them. They have a very fruity flavor. They have a very bright yellow tomato flavor, and I did like it, but I would much rather have a Kellogg's breakfast versus a pineapple. Next is the pink oxheart. I got these seeds from M.I. Gardener. These tomatoes were one that I put out before that last late frost. The plant recovered, but not great. I can't decide if I'm going to be regrowing these or not. They made some huge tomatoes, like over a pound, but they had a problem with rotting on the shoulders before the rest of it was ripe. And so when I went to process these, I had to cut half the tomato off the top so I could use the bottom. And for me, that seems like a waste of space for a plant. So I don't know if I'll be regrowing these or not. They do have a ton of meat, a ton. There is almost no gel and seeds in this whole tomato, and they're huge. But I just don't know if I will be regrowing those or not. So we'll see. The next one is San Marzano. These seeds are available all over the place. I got mine from M.I. Gardener. This is definitely a regrow. I think that this will probably be an always grow for me. These tomatoes have a ton of that nice Italian rich flavor to them, and I absolutely love them. My plant was also absolutely loaded down with fruit. It was one of the last 2 plants I pulled out of the garden, and I pulled all the green tomatoes off and brought them in the house. So those are always going to be a regrow for me, I think. They're perfect for sauce making and canning and that type of thing. The next one is a sweet scarlet dwarf. I actually had 2 of these plants. I got them from Katie. The seeds came from Tomato Fest once again. This was considered a dwarf plant that produced larger sized tomatoes. I only got 1 tomato off of both of the plants. I only got 1 tomato total. But those 2 plants I did not get until mid-June. And I think that I needed to have them in a bigger container. I had 1 in a grow bag, I had 1 in a slightly smaller pot, and I just don't think they really liked that much. I won't be regrowing those. I was exploring dwarf tomato options for people that maybe can only do things in pots, but I just don't think that one is one that I would regrow. There's other varieties out there. I know Firebird is one that Katie grew, and I tried a couple of the tomatoes off of those plants, and that was an amazing tomato, and she had them in big pots on her back patio. So those seeds came from Tomato Fest as well for the Firebird, and those tomatoes are delicious. The next one is the Thorburns Terracotta. Now this tomato we got from Baker Creek. It was the tomato that was in last year's catalog that they had a big half-page feature on because it was, the seeds were from the 1800s and blah blah blah. Okay, I will not be regrowing those. I did not think they tasted very good. They are kind of like a browny orange color tomato. I froze and canned most of them. I didn't really eat any of them. I ate a couple, but I didn't love the flavor of them. They were very inconsistent size also, which I don't love. They did make a lot. The plants made a ton of tomatoes, but I did not love them. Next is the triple crop. I got my seeds for this from My Gardener. These are definitely a regrow for me. My plants, I did not get in the ground until later, and they also were a little bit smaller than everything else when they went in the ground. They did make a pretty decent amount of tomatoes for me. I know other people that I grew plants for this year had way more success with them. So I will be for sure regrowing these next year. They have a very like classic red tomato flavor. They don't have a ton of gel and seeds in them. They are great for canning, and they're also great for just slicing and eating. So I would definitely recommend that, and I will be regrowing those again next year. So that covers it. Those are all my tomato varieties from this year and what I will be regrowing and not growing again. If you have any questions about anything that I grew this year, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I hope that this was helpful. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.